Good morning, I'm Francesca Maxime, and it is Tuesday, November 1st, 2016. This is WiseGirl. Thanks so much for checking out our little video chat this morning. It is All Souls Day, All Saints Day, Day of the Dead. Obviously, last night was Halloween here in the United States. Lots of little kids get dressed up in their costumes, venturing forth to ask for candy, and I had a good time putting some out and seeing them and their parents and caretakers take them out last night and earlier and earlier, it seems, in the day, actually, which may be because of the cold or maybe safety reasons. I'm not really sure, but it's good to see them. And one of the things that is abundant this time of year is change. I think seeing the end of October happen when just 2 weeks before here in New York, it was 80-something degrees. It's particularly warm again this week, but we're shifting into cooler weather for sure, as many of my friends who have colds unfortunately can attest. We can recognize that this is sort of a period of letting go and also a period of kind of sinking in a bit. It can be described as the fallow time, perhaps the time when things like leaves fall and the earth gets richer and a bit more heavy, if you will, and more dormant, perhaps to cultivate itself for that renewal that we all look forward to come spring, once the holidays have come and gone. But before we get to all of that of the spring, which we'll get to in the spring, in the present moment, it is All Souls Day or All Saints Day or Day of the Dead, and I wanted to reflect on a teaching that I heard this weekend at a retreat that I went to here in New York City, and it was essentially sort of the meditation instructor's way of saying, aging is in and of itself a way in which we as human beings become more awakened or enlightened or wiser, and the reason why that happens is because we naturally start to sort of thin out our bodies, whether it's mottled skin or sagging skin or losing hair or graying hair or, any number of things naturally happen within the body or for the body. And, we don't look the way that we did when we were 12 or 20 or, younger. And that part of the process that is naturally bringing to us, especially as we live longer and longer here in the West, is the process of being aware of that which we cling to. And that is often our bodies and our sense of who we are in terms of personality, right? I'm an athlete, or I'm a marketer, or I'm a teacher. But all these things shift over time. And I'd say about 20 years ago, my grandfather passed away on All Saints Day, All Souls Day. And he was clearly one of the biggest influences in my life and was a real gift and a real light to a lot of people, including me. And he said, at the time, I'm ready to meet my mother. He had a good relationship and a lot of admiration and respect for his mother, my Nana, my great-grandmother, whom I had never met, but was clearly a big influence in my family's life. And just a few months before that, he had sort of reconciled with the fact that he wasn't ready to meet her yet. He wasn't ready. He felt like he had some stuff to still work out. And this is after triple bypass surgery, a stroke, over the course of time. He passed in his 80s. So what is this business of getting older and thinning out, and how do we sort of cling to this idea of youth or idea of who we think we're supposed to be or what we're supposed to look like, or especially in the Western world and the world that we live in terms of one in which a lot of comparison is often fomented. There's a lot of judgments about what's better and what's worse, who's good and who's bad. I want to look like her, but not like her. I want to be like him, but not like him. What is this all about, and where do we end up with sort of feeling dissatisfied all the time and still looking like we want to reach more or achieve more or hold on to that which no longer is, whether it's our 28-year-old version of ourselves or whatever. And one of the things that we can begin to look at is just simply the fact that there is suffering in the world, that there is a certain amount of, I should say that there is the fact that things don't stay the same. And whether or not we choose to suffer is really more of a choice, but we have to kind of recognize that in order for it to even be something that we can bring into awareness and then possibly at some point do something about. So if things are impermanent and we can't necessarily keep things as they once were, as we've witnessed with our bodies, for example, then what can we do about it? We can acknowledge that we are clinging to something that isn't in the present moment and that isn't actually here right now. So perhaps the origin of what it is that is dissatisfying to us about life is the fact that things aren't as they are, or the way that rather things are as they are, but they're not the way that they used to be. So the question then comes, can we take refuge in the present moment, what we actually have right now, as opposed to some place that we still think we should get to, whether it's losing another 20 pounds, getting another promotion, living in a better apartment, finding a better lover, all of those kinds of things. The good news is there is a way to, I'll say, end that cycle of craving, clinging, suffering, and there are ways of living with integrity, with authenticity, with virtue, some of the qualities I admired in my grandfather, and that the ways to do that involve some of the tactics that he employed, I think, actually, including discipline, mindfulness, and in his own way, although he probably didn't know it, when he was gardening and when he was chopping wood and when he was working with gusto and full enthusiasm as a stonemason, building walls and mixing cement, but really being present to those things, mindfulness and meditation, and also with restraint. And restraint is sort of a word that in the Western culture we often don't want to talk about because we see it in a negative light. We don't really see it as something that's helpful to us. We see it as someone else telling us what to do. But I would invite you to consider whether or not you can look at restraint as a skillful, hopeful, liberating kind of action by creating a pause or by creating space or by creating some kind of ability within oneself through meditation and mindfulness, sort of training your mind to rest in the moment, and instead of reacting with that amygdala, small almond-shaped part of our brain that's in the back of our head, and sort of think more about what our prefrontal cortex can do, which is that executive function, decision-making part of our brains that enables us to be rational, and not in a cool, detached way necessarily, but in a way that cultivates wisdom. So those are a lot of things to think about today, but I just want to recognize that it is November 1st. In many traditions, it's All Saints' Day, All Souls' Day, Day of the Dead. It's a day to celebrate some of the shifts and changes, but consider, if you will, a shift in how we look at our lives and whether or not we can accept it today, even if it is the acceptance of the fact that we have to let go of some of our youth and some of the things that we thought might be or once were, but that there's a sort of liberation and ease when we can kind of sit in the fact that, you know what, right now, pretty much everything's okay. They could be better, but at the same time, grateful to be healthy, or I'm grateful to be loved, or I'm grateful to eat or take a hot shower. Some of those simple things can help us, I think, look at the ability to be more content and have greater well-being and ease and happiness in our day-to-day lives, and start to let go of that clinging and craving that, quite frankly, is based on control and our attempts to control. The only thing we can control really is our own minds. It's how we relate to things that really is something that we can control. But we can't actually often control what happens. We can control whether or not we choose to meditate. We can choose to be kind to someone We can choose to refrain from saying or doing something that we think might hurt someone. Those are the things that we can control and should probably cultivate if we want to invite this sense of greater well-being. I would submit to you, or I would suggest. But a lot of things we can't control in terms of the events, but how we relate to those things we can. So maybe some thoughts to consider. Of course, I want to hear from you. I want to hear your comments. Feel free to shoot me an email, shoot me a text, shoot me any kind of Instagram message or anything like that. My handles are at Francesca Maxime, pretty much everywhere. And thanks to Julia Jordan Dresses for my dress today. I'm off and running in the city, so have a good day and happy November.